Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's doForms webinar. I'm your host, Anthony, and I'll be here to be covering the inventory and asset management topic that we have for today. We're going to start off with a couple of PowerPoint slides just to quickly, at a high level, go through these two solutions that we offer. And then after that, we're going to go through some live examples and some live setups on how to set up these solutions as well. If at any point throughout the webinar anybody has any questions, there is an area in your GoToWebinar that will allow you to ask any questions, and I can stop and basically answer them as we go through. At the end of the webinar, this video will be posted on our video library, so anybody who needs to look back at it or wants to download a copy, feel free to check out our video library on the doForms website, where all of our past webinars, including this one today, will be up there. So today, we're going over two different topics, the first topic being inventory management and the second being asset management. So the first slide that we kind of have here basically just gives us a high overview of the different examples of inventory that we're able to do. The example that I have today is a simple inventory receiving and shipping products, but just at a high level, I'd like to discuss some of the other options that you're able to do with our inventory capabilities as well. So the first thing is, at a very high level, you're essentially able to retrieve and modify records from a database. So effectively what this means is we're able to, over the air, when you submit a form from one of your forms in your account, make modifications to a file or a database in doForms for things like inventory levels or locations or anything of that nature. So we're able to receive and ship products, which effectively adds to your inventory when you receive them, and when you ship them, subtracts it from your inventory. We have the ability to transfer products from one location to another location, whether that be from one warehouse to another warehouse, or maybe from one location inside of the warehouse to another location, maybe a shelf or something like that. We also have capabilities to reject or dump insufficient products. So if you have quality concerns with your inventory, if you're receiving, produce or something like that, where you need to mark things that maybe fell off of a pallet and got damaged, or maybe when they were received, they were rotten, something like that. We have all of those capabilities as well. And then, of course, ability to add, subtract, or move available inventory from one area to another area. The main thing to realize about the inventory system is it's highly customizable. And what we mean by that is there is a pre-canned kind of inventory system that we can supply to you for receiving and shipping products. But for the most part, we're able to effectively custom build any type of solution that you need around inventory. So if you have a specific question around a process or a transaction that you may be doing in your own organization that you don't see here, odds are we're able to support that as well. So if anybody has any questions around anything like that, I'm going to put my email address in here at the end of this meeting. Feel free to shoot me an email, and I can provide you with any of the necessary information you might have. So what you see on the screen here is basically a sample application that we built for one of our customers, where they have a bunch of different application screens that allow them to do different things. For example, receiving product, which adds it to their inventory, shipping product, which subtracts it from their inventory, but also keeps a running log of everything that was shipped and who it was shipped to. A move product capability, which allows them to take it from one shelf and move it to another shelf, or from one warehouse and move it to another warehouse. We have dump product, which, like I mentioned earlier, the specific customer uses fresh produce. So if they receive produce that is not acceptable, maybe it's past its expiration date, been dropped on the floor, something like that, they can basically go in there and mark, a set quantity. So maybe they received 100 of them, but only 5 of them are damaged, or 5 of them are no good. They can basically specify how many of each and basically mark it in the database that, hey, we received 100, but we only have 95 in stock because we had to dump 5. Same concept with the quality inspections. If for any reason they don't meet the quality inspection guidelines that they have, they can basically subtract off, as many of those inventory items as they need, and they will update their file to basically say, hey, I received 100, but I only have 90 here because 10 of them didn't meet our inspection, our quality inspection requirements. And then they have a find item age capability, which effectively just goes in, allows you to pick a product and gives you the history on that product. When it was received, who it was received by, the dates and times of all those transactions, if it's been moved from location to location. It's essentially just a running history of a particular item or product that they have in inventory, and just gives you a running history of everything that they have there. So we do have a quick demonstration, but I'm just going to quickly go through the asset management slide, and then we'll pop over to the live demonstrations of both. So for asset management, we have a couple of different features that we're able to take advantage of as well. So we have the ability to check in and out assets from a database, ability to move assets from one location to another, just like with the product or item inventory. We have the ability to manage each individual transaction and the ability to report on all of those transactions. So at the end of the day or end of the week, you can get kind of a running list of everything that you have in currently checked in that's available to be checked out. You can also get reports on everybody who checked things out and where they checked them out to, or the dates and times that they checked them out, essentially giving you an overall picture of where all of your assets or pieces of equipment are located at any given point in time. So you just see a quick little screenshot up here, which is actually from the live example that we're going to get into shortly. But basically, it's just a quick screen grab of 5 assets that they have that are all currently in inventory and the locations that they're at, and they can see the last transaction date and the last transaction user who basically checked this back into inventory. So if you look at location 1 here, this one was recently checked out and then checked back in on today's date by myself. So that's all we have on the slides for here. My contact information is at the bottom there. Again, I'm going to put that in the meeting at the end, so no need to copy it down now. But the first example that I want to bring up here, if I just quickly close down these tabs, is a received product application. So we have a received product and a shipped product. Both of these different forms here are basically tied to this inventory database. So as you can see here, I've already inputted 2 different pieces or 2 different items, I should say, into my inventory with different product IDs, one of which was already shipped out and the other one is currently in inventory. So the example that we have here is I'm going to use the received product form, which after I submit it, will add that product to my inventory list here. And then my ship product allows me to go in and has a drop-down list of everything that I have available and allows me to ship those out with some relevant questions associated to both. So as I go through and make transactions here, I'll be jumping back and forth from the actual form itself, which I'm just using our doForms form links to show here. But basically, I'll be submitting things from one tab and then jumping back and showing you how the database has been affected after we've done so. So the first thing I'm going to do here in the received product form is I have a product ID, a product description, a date received, and a quantity received. So whether you're on a handheld scanning device or a regular mobile device or a tablet or even a PC, basically you can either manually type this information in. If you have a barcode scanning capability on your device, you can scan barcodes, or you can just, like I said, simply type it in using the keyboard, a regular manual entry. So for this example, I'm going to add product 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to give it a sample description. I'm going to say the date received was today, and I'm going to say I received 100 of these products, and I'm going to go ahead and submit this. So while this is submitting, it should only take a second here, but just one quick comment that I want to make. There is a few different things that you're able to do from the form standpoint that kind of make the process much more efficient. The first thing is making everything on this page a required field. So what that kind of allows you to do is it takes away the human error capability of somebody not entering a quantity for something or not entering the product ID when they're receiving it, or maybe not selecting the date that they received. All of that information, because it's required on the form, does not allow them to go ahead and submit until they fill out all the relevant information. So it's kind of just some quick things that you can add into your form that can kind of take away the potential for human error that you would potentially have if you were using something like, let's say, an Excel spreadsheet or a pen and a piece of paper. So if I just jump back to my inventory list over here real quick, you'll notice now that I have a new row, a third row with the product ID, the description, the quantity I received, and a status of in inventory. You'll notice there's 2 different statuses here, in inventory and shipped, which is basically keeping track of everything that is available to me. Or if it's been shipped, it's no longer available in the list. I'm no longer able to do anything with it because those products have left the facility. We've shipped them out. So without going too much further, and before we jump into the ship product, I'd like to jump into the actual creation of the form and the tools that we use to kind of create these things. So if I just refresh this real quick, you'll notice the red asterisk on here is what I was referring to with the required fields. So if I try to submit this form with no information, or maybe I only fill out an ID and not a description, it's going to block the submission and basically make me fill out those fields. So I'm just going to jump over to my form builder, and I am going to open up our receive product form. So we can kind of step through the different processes, the different tools that we've used, as well as the most important one, which is our retrieve and modify tool, which is the tool that's going over the air and effectively updating these things in the inventory database. So the first part of the form is pretty straightforward. A couple of text fields, numeric fields for the quantity, and a date field for received. What I'm doing with the status is I have a hidden choose one question that basically has two potential answers: in inventory or shipped. I have it set as a default value of in inventory because this is the receive product form. So when it gets received into inventory, it should, its status should say that it's in inventory. So I default that to in inventory, a submit button, and then at the bottom here, I have a retrieve and modify tool. I'm not going to spend too much time on the setup of the retrieve and modify tool. We've done a previous webinar going through the setup using this specific tool for a bunch of different scenarios. So I'm just going to very quickly kind of glaze through this. If anybody is more interested in how we use these tools, there is a full-blown webinar that we spent a full hour on, basically going through and setting up this tool and its different capabilities. Again, on our doForms video library on the doForms.com website. But basically, in my retrieve and modify tool, I'm setting my source as my inventory database form, which is in view data in a project that I have created called lookups. I'm saying to the condition that I'm looking for is the product ID. And I have a setting here that says if it doesn't find that product ID, meaning that product has never been received before, it's going to add to the data source. So it's going to add a row for me. So what this add setting essentially is doing is if I hop back over to my inventory file, so my inventory database is, I have 3 products in here, but before I had submitted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there was only 2. So that add setting is effectively saying if it checks all of my product IDs and the one that I have entered on my form does not exist, go ahead and add it as a new product, which is what you can see here. This third row has been added. With that being said, if the product did exist, it could just simply add to the available quantity. So maybe yesterday you received product 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 50 of them, and then today, again, you received another 50. It can be configured that if it finds the product that you're looking for, or the item that you're looking for, it doesn't need to add a new one. It can just simply update your quantity to now add 50 more, giving you a total of 100 in this scenario. So jumping back over to the form, once I have established my condition and I have my modify and my add to data source set up, I'm just basically configuring here the different actions that are going to happen when I go ahead and submit this. So the first thing is I'm going to replace the product ID from my form to the product ID field in the database. Same for the description, same for the date. I'm going to add the received quantity to the received quantity field, and I'm going to replace the status, which in this example is defaulted to in inventory, to the status field. So basically what's happening is I'm mapping the fields from my receive form, so these 4 fields that you see here that I typed in and submitted, I'm mapping those to the different fields that I have in my inventory form. To take a quick step back, because I know I glossed over this, how we create the inventory database form is just a regular do form that we then use as a lookup. So what I mean by that is, and I realize I probably should have gone over this as the first step, so bear with me here. I have an inventory database form where basically I'm just taking the different attributes that I'm interested in and putting them into a form and publishing it. So in this example, I just have, a couple text boxes for the product information, the ID and the description, quantity received, the status field of in inventory or shipped, and then I also have 2 additional fields for ship date and shipped quantity, which we'll go over in a second when I use the shipping form. That's where these 2 fields are getting updated. And then I'm essentially just mapping those fields from this inventory database form to my receive form and just saying, hey, take the value from product ID and populate it in product ID, description to description, the date to the date, and the quantity received to the quantity received. So when I go ahead and submit my form, it goes ahead and takes the values from my form and populates them in the inventory file. Again, if anybody has any questions as I'm going through this or any scenarios they'd like to discuss, feel free to just throw them in the question box. So that's the received product. Again, just simply adding product. If I jump back over to my database here, simply adding products into your file and putting the quantity that you've received in there, giving them a nice status that it's available in inventory. Now I have a ship product form, which I'm just going to quickly refresh so we can see the required fields. Same concept here. We make the fields required, and what you're able to do is basically, if somebody tries to ship something but doesn't put a quantity or doesn't put a date, it effectively doesn't let them submit. So in here, I have a drop down, and you'll notice that there's only 2 items available that I can ship, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 8, 7, 9, 7. The reason being for this is, although I have 3 products in my inventory file, I have a condition set that says only show me products that I'm able to ship if they're currently in inventory. So there's only 2 records in here where the status is in inventory, i.e. giving us the 2 drop-down fields here for the ones that are available. So if I go ahead and I pick my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it automatically populates my description, the date that I received it, and the quantity that I had received. From here, I can come in here and say, okay, I want to ship these out today. I want to ship all 100 of them, and there's also some built-in logic here which doesn't allow me to go over. So if I try to put 101, it says, hey, the value cannot be larger than 100 because I have a condition set up that basically says, you're not able to ship more than you have in inventory. So I'll just go ahead and backspace that and put 100. And then I just have a truck number field where you can put down the different truck number information that you're shipping this product out on. So when I go ahead and submit this, as this is submitting, what's happening is in the background is it's going over the air now. It's similar to the receive, and it's updating my shipping date and my shipping quantity. What it also does now is if I reload my shipping form, I should only see 1 option in my dropdown because now that this item has been shipped out, there's only 1 that's available for me to continuously ship out. So with that being said, it's very simple to add a couple of extra things onto this process. For example, in most cases, organizations are not shipping out the total quantity that they have in inventory. Maybe they're shipping 25 of the 100 that they have. It's very easy to customize this solution here to, give you the shipped information, but to create it in a separate file. So instead of having the shipping information in the inventory file itself, you can actually create a shipping database that when the products get shipped out, it can give you, of the quantity that you've taken, it can say, hey, you shipped out 25 on this date, 50 on this date, and 25 on this date, giving you a total of 100, and here's all the dates associated to this specific product. This example is not set up like that, but just so that everybody is aware, it's pretty simple to go in and basically add in where if I shipped out 25, instead of it, just marking how much I shipped and how much I received, it can actually have an available column here that is getting updated and being subtracted from or added to from the received product. So instead of just seeing these kind of static values here, there can be an available inventory, which if you ship out 25 products, would basically give you an available balance of 75. So you still have 75 in inventory and you're still able to do things with those, but you're still able to ship out 25. Again, that's not how this current example is set up, but very easy to go ahead and make those customizations in this process. So let's dive into the actual creation of the ship product, which again is going to be very similar to the receive product, just a little bit different of a modified condition. So again, I just have, instead of a free entry box where you can type in the product ID, I went ahead and made it a dropdown, and I'm using my inventory database as my dropdown file. So this is basically going into my inventory file and saying, hey, drop down all of the products that I have in there. I also have a condition set here that says the status cannot be equal to shipped. So what this is doing for me is it's filtering down the list, and it's only including products that are still available in inventory. And then I have some destination fields down here that I'm basically saying, when I pick my product ID, auto-populate the description, the date, and the quantity that I received. I have my shipping date and my quantity fields required because those 2 fields we're going to use to modify back to the inventory database. So those are 2 required fields. Similar to the receive form, on this one, the status is preset to shipped. So I have it as a default value of shipped, and on my retrieve tool, almost identical setup to the receive form, except I'm able to, again, match the product ID to the product ID. I do not have the add to data source on in this scenario, because in this scenario, if I'm shipping something, it should exist in my inventory. So there's no need to have the add to data source on there, because it needs to be in my inventory. It needs to be something that I already have in order for me to even ship it. And then again, I come down here and do my modify fields, where in this example, I'm just simply updating the shipping date. I'm adding the quantity that they put to ship to the shipping quantity, and I'm replacing the status with the shipped status. So we do have one question that just came in. For the new users, can you talk about the lookup table needed? So thank you, Jolie, for your question. I'm assuming you're referring to the lookup for product ID that I have here in the ship form. Is that correct? Yes, okay. So first and foremost, this is not a requirement. The reason that I made it a dropdown is, again, the whole point of this process and everything that we pretty much do here at doForms is to make it as easy on the user and with as least amount of possibilities for human error as possible. So if I come back to my ship form here, and this was just a simple entry, that would still work, but that would require your employees who are either scanning or entering this information to be exactly matching what you have in your inventory. So if they accidentally added an extra character, or they used a lowercase instead of an uppercase, it could potentially not find it. The reason for that is when it's going and doing its modifications, it's looking for a specific product ID, which you can see here in my retrieve and modify condition. It's looking for a specific product ID, and then the values of those need to match. So if I have product ID 12345, in my submission for my ship form, I need to have that same value 12345. So a free entry box is, will work, and if they typed in 12345 exactly the same, it will work. But to take out kind of the potential for error in there, I went ahead and created a dropdown, a lookup, using my inventory file. How I did that was in my build forms here, there is lookup data at the top. I can click on new. And then there's two options, upload or use form. Upload is your standard Excel document, CSV document, something like that, or you can use a form that you have created in doForms. As you saw a little bit earlier, I created the inventory database form in doForms. So I'm going to go ahead and hit use form. I'm in my lookup project, and I have inventory database, and I can click the checkbox that says update automatically and save. When I save this, it creates a lookup for me to reference in a dropdown. And all I did after that was I used a data lookup tool, dragged it in, named it product ID. I set my source equal to my lookups inventory database form that I've been using, which is essentially this form here in view data. So it's basically taking all this information and creating it into a dropdown, and I'm referencing that. And then the only extra thing that I'm doing here is I'm saying I want my product ID to be the drop-down field. So when they click on it, it drop downs all the product IDs. And I just added an extra condition that basically says, give me everything, all the products that I have, but only show me the ones that I'm able to actually select and do something with. So the lookup condition here allows me to go in there and basically set a condition that says, the status field cannot be equal to shipped. If it is equal to shipped, do not include it in this list. And so this basically drop-down list is feeding right into that view data. So when it goes and drops down, it's dropping down the exact value that I have in there. So there's no potential for error there. I can't mistype a character. I can't scan something that's different. I can't, put a lowercase instead of an uppercase. It takes away all of the, potential error that could happen from, just user interaction, and, gives you a simple drop down to basically just select something that exists there, which in turn is making your modify be able to find that particular value nice and easy because it matched perfectly. So again, the lookup is not necessarily needed, but is definitely recommended because it does take a lot of the potential risk out of people making, human errors. Jolie, does that answer your question? You need me to go into any more detail? Okay. So Jolie just responded she'd like me to go into a little bit more detail. Can you just be a little bit more specific around what you're confused about in terms of the lookup table? Just going to give Jolie a second here to respond to the question. While we're waiting for Jolie to respond, again, with the ship product here, just to snap back a couple of seconds here, again, everything that you're seeing here is customizable. So if you wanted to ship things out, and on top of having the truck number, you also wanted to have the driver, maybe the location it was going to, things like that. Everything that you're seeing here field-wise is completely customizable. You can add or remove as many fields as necessary. In your inventory form, you could have fields in there for the truck number and the driver. So when it gets modified back, it can go ahead and actually put that information in the inventory file. Anything that you're basically seeing here, we can customize fully to your specific organization's needs. Jolie, just go ahead and type something up. I'm going to go ahead and move on for everybody else, and we can connect after the webinar, and I'll answer your questions, any additional questions you might have. Okay. So that is basically just a simple example of receiving and shipping products. Now, at the same time, from the PowerPoint, we discussed a couple of other forms that you can do in here. So one of those things, which kind of ties into the asset management, which we'll jump over to in just a second here, you can also add things like location in your inventory, wherever you're maybe storing that part or that product or that item. If you have a location in there, you can run reports around, how much inventory do I have in a particular area of my warehouse or in my building. You can create a third form, so you'd have a receive, a ship, and a move form, which allows you to take, maybe a box or two of a particular product, move it from location 1 to location 2, all of which is using the retrieve and modify capability. The main thing to take away from this is, you build your form normally. You build the form with the fields that you're going to need to capture, the piece of information that you're going to need to capture for each one of these transactions. The customization comes in around the modify, because basically you need to tell the form when it goes ahead and submits what's supposed to happen to your inventory when you go ahead and submit that. So receive is going to add stuff, ship is going to subtract and mark some things, and then move can just simply be a transfer from one location to another location. You can switch warehouses and do all kinds of crazy things like that as well. So with that, I'm just going to segue into asset management, where we basically have a similar database created called an asset database. Again, is just a form that I created that has some different fields. And again, I used it as a lookup, just like I did with the inventory example. But in here, a little bit different of a setup here, because when you have assets or pieces of equipment that you're, basically keeping track of, this example that I have here is a check in and out system, whether it's used for assets or pieces of equipment or whatever it may be, where people can come in, basically pick a piece of equipment or pick an asset, say, I'm taking this out to use on this job, and it updates the inventory list to basically say, hey, this product was checked out by this person at this time. And then when they check it back in, it requires them to mark the location that they put it back in. So all of which is basically tracked in doForms and is reportable, so you can get reports on all this stuff. So how I went ahead and set this up is I just created a simple Excel document, which I'll bring up for you here in just a second, as kind of my starting point, right? So typically in asset management, you have some type of Excel or CSV or a piece of paper where, you have, the asset information, the description, and where it's currently located. So as a starting point, I basically created a little sample document and pretended that I have, 5 pieces of equipment or 5 assets. And I'm marking it as in inventory for the status, the IDs, the description, and locations. And I imported this into doForms by doing a file, import from Excel. And now I have those assets and they're available in the system for me to check in and check out. So again, I came into my build forms, went to my lookup data, selected my lookup project, my asset form, and created that as a drop-down list. And the reason that I'm mentioning that, as you'll see in a second here, on my asset database form, I can do a check-in or a check-out. So same concept we have with the inventory where I'm only able to see things that have not been shipped. I have a similar condition that basically says, if I pick to check something in, it needs to be something that has already been checked out. I can't just check something in that has never been in inventory and nobody knows what it is. So if I click check in, you'll notice the drop-down list doesn't show me anything, because if we look at the database, everything is in inventory. Nothing has been checked out. So instead, let's say I want to check out a piece of equipment or an asset. So let's say I want to check out asset number 5. It automatically gives me the description and the location of where that asset is currently located. So especially if it's, a large organization and they have a lot of pieces of equipment or a lot of assets, and, somebody's trying to find something, it's a great tool to basically be able to, either scan it or pick it from a list, and it will automatically come back of what that asset is and where it's currently located, so you don't need to go around and try to find where that is. Then it just has a transaction date and a transaction user and a reason for checkout. So I just have myself defaulted in here on my computer here, but these two tools here, just to take a step back, the date can be automatically triggered. They don't have to select the date. The reason I left it open is because sometimes people are planning to check things out in the future, and they would just want to go ahead and do their transaction today, but they're not actually going to take the asset or the piece of equipment until tomorrow. So this gives them kind of free range to go in and actually tell, the warehouse or wherever the piece of equipment or the asset is stored, when they're coming to pick it up. So let's say I want to check it out today and, need this asset for job 1, 2, 3, 4. So it just has a little reasoning for you checking it out. Again, this here, after I check something out, we can trigger an email to someone letting them know that, hey, Anthony has checked out asset number 5 from this location, and I can give you the reason for them there. So basically the person running the warehouse or wherever you're storing this information can kind of have some insight of the day-to-day transactions that are going on and where things are going. So if I go ahead and check this out, what's going to happen in my file here is you'll notice that the status just changed to checked out, and the location has been cleared because it's no longer in inventory. It's no longer assigned to a location. It's been checked out. Same concept here. I have the last transaction date and the last transaction user to basically say, okay, it was checked out on this date by Anthony. Again, I could add more fields in here. I could add the reasoning for checking it out. I could add, the job it's associated to for checking it out. I could add, specifically what location it was checked out of. Again, a lot of customization here, but for this example, it's just simply checking it out and telling me the date and the person who did it. So now, if I bring this form up again, and instead of doing a check out this time, I did a check back in, I should see that product available to be checked in because it has a current status of checked out. It has no location, so that means it must be out. So if I go to check in now, you'll see that I can now check in asset 5 because I previously took it out. It's no longer available in inventory. It's with me, and I want to come and check it back in. So again, it's going to automatically populate the description for me, and then I can say what location I want to put this in. So one thing I want to bring up about the locations is you notice that it's allowing me to put in any one of the location 1 to 5. It's allowing me to put this anywhere. But let's say for whatever reason, I only had one asset or one piece of equipment per location, right? So location 1 can only have one, location 2 can only have one, so on and so forth. You could set conditions up, so you can add an additional field in here that is basically an available or not available associated to the location. And you can filter your list to only show available locations. So instead of me saying location 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it can basically only drop down location 5 because there's nothing assigned there yet. So again, a little bit more customization involved there, but definitely possible. I know a lot of situations where, people want to see, keep a, audit history of basically everything from where it's been, if it moved 15 times, they want to see all of those different kind of transactions. And with a little bit of customization, you can get to that point. But if I just come back here and I'm going to put it back into location 5 where I got it from, I'm putting it back today, and that says check in. And when I click check in, I come back to my document, or I come back to my asset database. My status has been updated to back in inventory. My location is back to location 5, and the transaction date was today, and Anthony put it back. So if this had been tomorrow, the date would have updated to show tomorrow. So with that, you also have, outside of just the database itself, You also have the individual transactions that you can reference and report on. And the same goes for the inventory example that we did as well. For inventory, just looking at your available inventory list is great, but what if you're trying to look for a specific transaction? Somebody shipped 50 and they made a mistake. They were supposed to ship 75, but you're not sure who shipped it out and you're trying to identify that person. In my main project here where I actually have my forms, and you'll have to excuse me, I don't believe I set up the view here to be that great, so let me just go ahead and make some setting changes. So anybody who's not aware, by default, it puts a couple of the fields from your form at the top here, but you can click the little settings icon and customize the different fields that basically you're saying that you want to set, and it just kind of gives you a high-level view. But from within here, I can basically look at all of my check-in, check-out records. If I add the mobile number or the nickname, of whoever checked these things out, I can basically identify who did each transaction, and then you can also report on this. So specifically for the asset management, you can have a report sent to you daily of all of the pieces of equipment that were checked out, by whom, as well as all the equipment that was checked in and by whom, as well as maybe a weekly or a monthly report of the same thing, where you kind of want to see a kind of running history of where that asset has been over the last month and how many jobs it's been assigned to or whatever it may be. So not only do you have your, I create a separate project for my database files because I don't want them accessible to my mobile users, but having the asset database itself gives you a high level of where something is at a given time, but the different transactional records gives you a little bit of insight of, an audit history of where that asset has been, how many times it's been checked in and out, if somebody's checking it in and out over and over again, things like that. And then you can use that data for whatever purposes make sense, to better your organization. So let's jump into, to kind of finalize this webinar today, let's jump into how we went and built this. So I'm going to open up my asset management form. I have a layout grid up here with the transaction type, which is just a choose one of check-in and check-out. And then based on if I'm choosing check-in or check-out, I have relevance conditions on my two sections that are basically showing two different areas depending on what I choose, right? So if I bring up the form once more, you notice when I pick check-out, it's different fields than when I pick check-in. And how I accomplish that is I basically have a check-in section, which is only being displayed if the transaction type is equal to check-in. And then I have a check-out section, which is only being displayed if the transaction is equal to check-out. So you'll notice if I click check-in, I get these fields, but if I click check-out, it changes the location field and adds in the reason. So you're able to kind of customize, instead of having two different forms, a check-in form and a check-out form, it's much more efficient to just do it all in a single form and just have a transaction type drop-down where you can pick either or and basically display the relevant questions needed for that transaction. So back to the form. I have the two sections, check-in, check-out. Same concept that I was doing with the inventory. I have a hidden status field that when it's being checked in is automatically defaulting to in inventory. I have an asset ID drop-down, which again is just pointing to my lookup project, the asset database. It's dropping down different assets, and it's only showing me statuses that are equal to checked out. Because if I'm checking something in, it has to have been checked out first. So this is basically limiting my list to only stuff that's been checked out for me to bring back in. And then I'm just designating the description down to the description field. If I scroll down a little bit further, I have my retrieve and my modify tool. Again, I'm going to go through and I'm going to set my source to the asset database. I'm matching my asset ID to asset ID CI, which is the data name referring to the asset ID dropdown for check-in. So very important and a very useful tip when building forms and doForms is your data names, because a lot of these questions overlap. In other words, there's an asset ID dropdown for both a check-in and a check-out. But using doForms, it doesn't allow you to have the same name for two fields. So especially because we're going to be referencing these fields, it's always good to, when you're filling out a specific, particular data name, make it descriptive. So when you're going through and doing your modifies, or if you're doing relevance on it, it's very easy to identify, right? So for me, I just simply put CI for check-in after all of my fields here to specify those as the check-in fields. And then if I scroll down a little bit more here, you'll see CO, which is my checkout fields for anything that's related to being checked out. So if I come back to my retrieve tool, my condition here is I'm matching the asset ID to the asset ID that I'm filling out in the check-in section. Again, no need to add because these are all items that exist in my inventory already, so there's no need to add. And then I'm just going down and replacing my different fields, replacing the status with the defaulted in inventory, replacing the location, replacing the transaction date, and replacing the user. One other key thing that I'm doing here is I also have relevance on the retrieve and modify tool. So just like any other field in doForms, you can have modifications or retrieve and modify tools basically only trigger if specific questions are answered a certain way or specific values are chosen. So what I mean by that is when I go ahead and submit this form, if I'm submitting a checkout form, I don't want my check-in logic to also happen when I submit. So how we accomplish that is I'm basically saying only go ahead and do these modifications in this tool if the transaction type is equal to check-in. And similarly, on my checkout form, I have another retrieve tool that only comes into effect if I do a checkout. So with that, if I pick check-in, these modifications get triggered. If I pick checkout, the checkout modifications get triggered. So if I scroll down here, same setup down here. Just the only change I made is, when you're checking something back in, you need to set a location. Whereas if you're checking it out, you don't need to set a location. It just tells you the location. Have a reason for checkout, which again has the same relevance. And then I have my retrieve tool down here, which this one is tied to the asset ID CO for checkout. Again, no add or delete needed. And I go through and I'm replacing my different fields. So you'll notice here, instead of replacing, I'm choosing to clear the location because after I check something out, it's no longer in my inventory. It's no longer assigned to a location. So instead of replacing that with something, I'm just clearing the value out, basically saying, hey, it's no longer in any location in here. You could just as easy, if you didn't want it to be blank, you could just as easily change that to, replace it with a text of, none, or have it checked out in the location field. Again, a lot of customization that you can do here, and there's a lot of different things that you can kind of play around with customization-wise. That's pretty much it. And then, the last thing I have on here is just two submit buttons. Again, both relevance-based. Only one, the checkout button pops up if I pick checkout. Check-in button pops up if I click check-in. So again, it all kind of breaks down to the retrieve and modify setup and basically just customizing what you want to happen when you go ahead and submit that form. So just like with the inventory, I'll just kind of wrap this up with a couple of statements here. Just like with the inventory, anything that you're seeing here can be customized. If you have additional information for your assets or equipment, maybe you have, the same products, but they have different sizes or they have different colors or, you have, 500 locations or, whatever it may be, you can basically customize the solution that we have here to basically add in any of those extra fields. And the process for that is basically just modifying your asset database or your inventory database forms and including the relevant fields that are relevant to your business. So for the assets, with check in and out, you can also, like I said, you can also have fields up here around, what it was checked out for, give you a little bit more detail in here. So it doesn't just say, hey, asset 5 was checked out by Anthony. It could maybe say, hey, asset 5 was checked out by Anthony because he needs it for this job and he's using it for this specific, function. So you can go kind of as crazy into the details as necessary when you're setting these things up. And that's pretty much all that we have on these two topics here. Just again, to quickly go over, we have a receive and ship form, which adds and ships products out of your inventory. We have an asset management that allows you to check in and out assets or equipment. And everything that you've seen here today is 100% customizable. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to go ahead and throw them in the questions box. If we don't have any questions, again, this video is being recorded and will be uploaded to our video library, which can be found on the doForms.com site. I am going to go ahead and in the chat window put in my email address as well as our support email address. So anybody who has any questions, would like any help setting these things up, has any particular setup questions, or can we do something, anything like that, feel free to reach out to me. We'll absolutely help you out. We'll absolutely jump on a phone call with you, or do a screen share and help you set it up. Even if you're not sure if it's something that we can do, ask us. 9 times out of 10, it's something we can do because of how flexible we are with our customization. We can do a lot of things. So if anybody has any needs for asset tracking, asset management, inventory management, inventory control, anything like that, please do reach out for us. And I appreciate everybody joining today's call. It doesn't look like there's any questions from today. I saw a comment come in from Rama. Rama, thank you very much. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their week and their weekend. And again, if you need us, just reach out to us and let us know. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your continued support of doForms. And again, if you need us, let us know. Thanks. Have a good one.